No dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone. This podcast is called Chaos. Can't think of a better word to describe what is happening in the world today, as well as in the United States today, other than this one single word, chaos. In fact, I was thinking that there was this great sitcom show way back in the day called Get Smart. And in Get Smart, there was a secret agent, Agent Smart, who, of course, Maxwell Smart, who would constantly fight against chaos. Chaos was the name of the crime organization. And I think that's kind of a metaphor of what is happening today in the world. We have criminals across the planet that are trying to create chaos, at least so it seems. And then we have a government in the United States that is incapable of explaining to us what our objectives are, other than just a war. And speaking of which, good old Hillary Clinton was heckled recently at an event. And she was visibly, and I mean visibly, flustered as she was challenged over her hypocrisy and what seems to be the desire of many in the Democrat Party, maybe, but also, quite frankly, the Republican Party, who are just kind of heading us towards World War III. And obviously, I don't think anyone wants World War III in terms of the American people. We don't want World War III, but our government? I mean, what is happening that it seems that things are unraveling so much that they're creating chaos? So former First Lady Hillary Clinton was heckled Monday at the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's actually the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but they call it the University Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, at Columbia University in New York, and it was absolutely magical. After 3 minutes, and for more than 3 minutes, one young man wouldn't let Clinton's undeserved and unelected sense of authority get her off the hook for her party's rhetoric towards the Hamas attacks against Israel and the Palestinian people. Apparently, Clinton was talking about international human rights violations with former president of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, before the man could be heard talking about her blatant hypocrisy in front of the crowd. So in other words, there you have Hillary Clinton at this event, and she's talking about atrocities in Chile. This just happened, by the way, and atrocities in Africa, but not talking about the atrocities in the Middle East. And moreover, while she's doing all of these things, she really doesn't have a suggestion as to how to end what seems to be a country, the United States, tilting towards war with China, Russia, Iran, obviously Yemen, maybe Venezuela, maybe Cuba. Who knows? Who knows? But certainly in North Korea, certainly the axis of evil, if you want to call them that. And this gentleman gets up and he actually questions her. And oh, by the way, questioning Hillary Clinton, you always have to be very careful, especially when you do it publicly, because you could also be suicidal because so many people that have questioned Hillary Clinton or embarrassed her end up disappearing. And if you remember the election in 2016, when the debate occurred between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Trump basically went right at her and called her a criminal. And up to that point, no one had actually challenged Hillary Clinton publicly like that without having received a great deal of retribution in so many different ways. Oh, by the way, he actually has received retribution, hasn't he? He's been charged by basically every state and federal, blue state agency and federal agency for crimes. And look, I just think that when we have a world that's full of chaos, the American people deserve to know what is going on. And Hillary Clinton at this event is talking about all of these external crimes against humanity, but she's not talking about the one that just occurred, which is odd, right? And she talks about, the fact that we need to continue to help the Ukraine. They need to protect our borders, but not the American borders. And you have to ask yourself at some point, what is actually happening to our government? And all I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that we deserve a competent and comprehensive explanation of what the objective is. What is the end game for the United States? Why are we getting involved in any of these international debacles? Obviously, in Israel, this is unique, right? Israel's been a friend of ours. They're part of Western civilization. They are the only democracy in the Middle East. That is a fact. Israel does not tolerate terrorists. The United States does not tolerate terrorists. But then you ask yourself, well, how about the Ukraine? Why are we supporting them? And now you have China that is sending warships, my understanding is an aircraft carrier, to the Med. And gee, what could go wrong there, right? What could happen? Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, we have this clip from Hillary Clinton. And this heckler, if you will, I'm not even sure it's appropriate to say he's a heckler. He's just asking questions. And it's about a minute long, and I really want you to listen to this because it's interesting. Because I think that most Americans do want answers. And this is worth listening to. And it goes to what is happening across the planet and in the United States. Here it is.
Struck by the hypocrisy
of
this.
Two more people to hear from.
I'm sorry.
You have a chance. Well, I'm not sorry. You sit down.
I know you're not sorry. That's the point. The hypocrisy of this speech. The hypocrisy of the fact that what do you have? Can you please
make
a statement about President Joe Biden's speech? This is a clearly warmongering speech. President Joe Biden is calling for $100 billion of funding for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine, and we're supposed to just bundle these together and pretend like we're going to rush to World War III, and we're all just going to let Hillary Rodham Clinton sit here. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
This is not the way to have a conversation.
I'm sorry.
If you want to have a conversation, you're welcome to come talk to me afterwards.
You can sit here. Okay, right. You're gonna wait for me, right? Please, I do not believe you.
I will listen to you, and I will respond to you.
I do not believe you. Respectfully, I do not believe you. And the fact of the matter is that the American people's voice are what need to be heard.
Yeah, they are being heard.
Because our president is not speaking for the American people, and neither are you.
That's your opinion. That's your opinion.
Yes, that's my opinion.
Oh my gosh. Did you hear how Hillary Clinton is yelling back at this gentleman? I mean, she's yelling at him. I mean, a wise person would at least try to engage with the conversation and try to provide, once again, some sort of comprehensive response that could articulate the American position moving forward in the world. Okay, so we are a superpower. We all know that. What is the responsibility of a superpower? And maybe define that. And define what our interests are and what we are protecting. And define who our enemies are. Be willing to do that. And talk about the fact that if we don't involve ourselves in the Ukraine, maybe as an example, this isn't me saying this, I'm saying perhaps Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden could do this, as well as the Republicans. Maybe explain what happens if we don't get involved in the Ukraine. What would happen if we don't get involved in the Middle East? And we just disengage? What would happen if we don't get involved to protect Taiwan? I think maybe just answering those simple questions, what would the world look like if we disengaged from those particular conflicts or those areas of conflict? If you did that and you were able to come to the conclusion and articulate for the American people that there would be grave danger by doing so to the United States itself and to the American people, and that freedom of movement would be greatly restricted across the globe if we were to do that, if you actually described that and articulated that, then maybe you could rally the American people behind you, but no one has done that in the Republican Party, and no one has done that in the Democrat Party. I mean, there was a time when you would have Ronald Reagan as an example, and he would get up and he would articulate America's vision, America's principles, and why we're engaging in certain conflicts. And then George Bush, the first George Bush, and then Bill Clinton. Even Bill Clinton was able to do that. And then, of course, you fast forward and it just seems like America is engaged in endless wars. So that means that our leaders are failing us when we're engaged in endless wars or the threat of endless war. And what is the purpose of being a superpower if it is no longer a deterrent whatsoever? So therein lies the question, right? If you're a superpower and you have not only weapons of mass destruction, but you have weapons that certainly could neutralize a regime once and for all, not the people, not the citizens, but the regime itself. But the regime doesn't think that you would ever use them. Then what is the point of being a superpower? The whole point of being a superpower and having a strong military is so that you don't actually have to use it. Yet, instead, we are barreling towards a world war, and we have no one articulating to us why we're doing this and what is actually going on in the world that's causing us to get involved. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is about chaos, and we have chaos in America's public schools. So ladies and gentlemen, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana recently had a hearing on Capitol Hill in the United States Senate, whereby he actually questioned some folks who voluntarily came and testified, allegedly at least, but you're going to hear it yourself, for books that would be in public libraries, in public schools, K to 12, okay? In some cases, these books are in public schools and middle school, in some cases, high school. And the question is, who actually determines what your child gets to check out of the library and read? Who gets to decide? Is it the school? Is it by committee? Or is it the parent? Do parents decide? And really, I think this is a huge issue moving into the 2024 election. Glenn Youngkin of the state of Virginia proved this. And moving forward, this will be one of the defining moments of the 2024 election. The left thinks that parents don't have rights, and the right thinks that parents, of course, are in charge of their children, which obviously they are. They're their children. The left, including far left regimes across the planet, intentionally try to disassociate you with your children so that they can brainwash them. This is the oldest trick that the left has been using throughout history, world history. Well, Senator Kennedy takes this on, and he asks some pretty tough questions. And he decides to read explicit, and graphic excerpts from the books themselves in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And he does so in front of some guests. And I believe one of those guests is the Illinois Secretary of State, who I guess is directly involved and in charge of public education in the state of Illinois. And this gentleman's name is Giannoulias, Secretary of State Giannoulias in the state of Illinois. And so you have Senator Kennedy of Louisiana first reading about these books and reading excerpts from them. And then we have some follow-up clips from Senator Kennedy asking various guests who are testifying about these books. First up, Senator Kennedy, here is the clip.
Let's take two books that have been much discussed. The first one is called All Boys Aren't Blue, and I will quote from it. I put some lube on and got him on his knees, and I began to slide into him from behind. I pulled out of him and kissed him while he masturbated. He asked me to turn over while he slipped a condom on himself. This was my ass, and I was struggling to imagine someone inside me. He got on top and slowly inserted himself into me. It was the worst pain I think I have ever felt in my life. Eventually, I felt a mix of pleasure with the pain. Close quote. All boys aren't blue.
A book that is in K-12 libraries in many public schools across America. Here's the next clip, ladies and gentlemen. Listen up.
The second is another much discussed book. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called Genderqueer. Okay? Let me read an excerpt from that. Quote, I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You're going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside of me. End quote.
So that is the second book, as an excerpt from the second book, 2 books available in public schools from K-12 across America. And to be fair, not every public school, but increasingly they're being snuck into the libraries of those schools. Okay. So then, United States Senator from Louisiana, Senator Kennedy, asks Illinois Secretary of State Alexis Giannoulias some questions. Now, remember, this Secretary of State of Illinois showed up to testify about why these books are necessary in public schools, mind you, public school libraries. So he's going to try, he's going to try to give the typical BS liberal response, which works in Illinois, of course, among certain circles at least, but not when you're in front of Senator Kennedy, who's a serious senator. Here's this exchange, ladies and gentlemen. Listen up. Here it is.
Mr. Secretary, what are you asking us to do? Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the 2 books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this...
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But what I would also tell you that we're not advocating for kids to read porn, to Senator Booker's point.
What are you advocating for?
We are advocating for parents, random parents, not to have the ability, under the guise of keeping kids safe, to try and challenge the world view of every single manner on these issues.
You're getting conceptual game.
I'm not getting conceptual.
Well,
I'm saying
yes, you are. Yes, you are. Because I want to know what you're recommending. It sounds to me like what some of you are saying, the librarians should decide who gets to see that book.
I'm saying when individual parents are allowed to make a decision of where that line is, and To Kill a Mockingbird, which involves a rape scene, should that book be pulled from our libraries? I think it becomes a slippery slope.
I think you ought to think about it a little bit more before you come here.
I've thought about,
Senator, you're going to propose something, you ought to be able, in 30 seconds, to be able to explain what you're asking us to do.
So there you have Senator Kennedy grilling the Secretary of State of Illinois, Giannoulias, concerning Giannoulias's support of having these books in libraries. And to be fair here, Senator Kennedy is not saying that the books ought to be removed from the libraries. This is not what he's saying. He's instead questioning who's in charge of issuing these books to the children and who ultimately decides whether or not a child can check out such a book. Okay? So next, and this is funny, this is ridiculously funny, I'm sorry, it just is. Senator Kennedy questions another individual who's sitting at the table to testify. And this gentleman's name is Cameron, but I think he goes by the term mix, like M-I-X, like he's mixed, I think. I think. I read this, I heard this, kind of hard to tell, but that's the whole point, right? The whole point is to play this game in front of the Senate and create a clown show, because it is a clown show. Not by Senator Kennedy, by the way, but by these leftists who show up and they're advocating for their own personal interests and for their, quite frankly, it's a mental health issue, clearly, when you look at this gentleman, rather than for who's actually in charge. And Senator Kennedy masterfully deals with this individual. Here's the clip. Here it is.
Cameron, tell me what you're proposing.
It's pronounced mix.
Mix? Is that how would you like me to refer to you?
Senator, your definition of sexual is synonymous with LGBTQ identity.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you to tell me you read those two excerpts.
Genderqueer.
Do you think that, are you asking that only librarians and not parents have any say in whether minors can read those books? Is that what you're saying?
Genderqueer has never been in my school library, so it's never been banned.
Well, suppose it was. Should it be up just to the librarian, or should parents have a say?
There should be facilitation of collaboration between students.
Should parents have a say?
Parents should be working with students and educators to be making decisions, because students are.
And who decides ultimately? The librarian, or do you take a vote, or who takes the vote?
Book review committees in the community in my school district.
You want a committee to decide?
There are committees.
Okay. Well, I'm asking you, how do we decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available in the library? What would you, if you were running things, what would you do?
All Boys Aren't Blue, the scene you mentioned, is about sexual abuse.
I know what it's about.
It's not
What
erotic.
would you do in terms of making the books available? Would you say anybody can see them, or they have to be in a special session?
Students who do not read books like All Boys Aren't Blue cannot learn what is appropriate.
I understand that.
They cannot learn.
I understand, but none of you
about
want to
abuse.
answer my question. You come here and you say censorship is bad, and of course it's bad. But the obvious response is, okay, you heard the books we're talking about. Okay, we're not talking about Catcher in the Rye. So tell me what you want, who gets to decide. And all I've heard is the librarians. And parents have nothing to do with it. And if that's your response, what planet did you just parachute in from?
Parents, Senator.
Or what country, more appropriately? This is not China.
So that's exactly right, ladies and gentlemen. In communist and totalitarian societies, the way the government, the totalitarian and communist government, maintains its control of the society is by brainwashing the children. And the way you brainwash children is first and foremost to separate them from the parents, so that the parents no longer have decision-making authority over the children's education. And then the next thing that you do is decide, as a totalitarian government, what kind of books the children get to read. And the parents no longer have a say in what the children get to read. So the children are then indoctrinated into the government's philosophy of complete and utter control and of giving absolute obedience to the dear leader and to the government. And that's exactly what these individuals are also advocating. They're saying, this guy Cameron or Mix or Nix, whichever one it was, I'm not quite sure, but the individual who kind of looked like a eunuch, Mr. Nix or Cameron or Mrs. Nix, I'm not sure, was saying that basically books that are put inside of libraries and that children get to check out, or books assigned in the classroom, are decided by book committees or committees. And that parents don't get an opportunity to have their child opt out of any of those books. And that is exactly why Senator Kennedy says, you know, what planet did you parachute in from, or what country? Because literally, this is exactly the way you take control of society. And this is exactly the way you eliminate free thought in a society. And of course, they're going to say, no, you're eliminating free thought because you're not letting these kids read these books. Oh, really? So there's nothing that's age appropriate anymore? Parents aren't in charge anymore? I'm sorry, but they are. I know plenty of parents who won't let their children read certain books that I know I wouldn't have a problem with. I mean, I do indeed, by the way, have a problem with these books in public libraries that are in K-12 education. I do. I think it's wrong. But I do know parents who won't let their children read just about anything. But that is the parent's decision. Okay? It's not my decision. And what we're trying to say here in the public school environment is that parents no longer have any say whatsoever. Okay, so then we have this final clip with Senator Kennedy. It's pretty remarkable. I think this is when he comes back to the Secretary of State of Illinois. We have the final clip here, and here it is.
Parents, Senator, for all due respect, parents absolutely have a say. My parents were immigrants, came to this country. We never checked out books without our parents seeing what books we were reading. They encouraged us to read books.
Mr. Secretary, I understand this is good for your politics back home.
It's got nothing to do with my politics. My bill is passed. My bill is passed.
It has everything to do with your politics.
I'm here to...
But you came here with a problem, and I'm trying to understand the solution, and you don't have one.
We solved the solution.
Other than to tell us that we don't agree with you, we'll be on the wrong side of history.
We solved the problem in Illinois. We fixed it because we...
well, there are others you could work on.
Well, that's why I'm here to help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To help other states make these decisions.
So there you have the Secretary of State saying, we solved this problem already in Illinois. And they haven't. The way they've solved the problem in Illinois is to eliminate the parents from the decision-making process. So you no longer have a choice. And of course, you also don't have a choice of sending your kid to a school that more fits your values. You're stuck in the government-run schools. And then you can't afford, because the taxes are so high in Illinois, to send your kid to a private school. So it just never ends. And then you have, the Secretary of State saying, but we've solved the problem. And Senator Kennedy says, yeah, I think there are a lot of other problems in Illinois that you haven't solved. And you're really focused on this problem. It's just unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. We have this incredible situation in America where an entire party is not listening to the American people. The Democrat Party is not listening to the American people and understanding that public education is so fundamentally broken and that we need competition in education so that there can be more choices and more availability of parents to fit into and put their children into curriculum that actually fits their values. Makes perfect sense. And so that's more chaos. So we have chaos in the international scene, as we're calling this podcast, chaos with potential of world war, chaos in America's school system. And you heard that firsthand. People saying, no, we should have books by committee. Parents don't get to decide. And then we have chaos, of course, in this ridiculous area of trying to trans children, which of course is what the public education system is trying to do in many cases, not all cases, but many cases. The Grand Marshal, the Grand Marshal in a parade recently, it was a pride parade, is 11 years old. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is in the Orlando Sentinel, Orlando, Florida. Hardly a right-wing newspaper. So we know it's so. Dempsey Jara, youngest Grand Marshal in history of Come Out with Pride Parade. So 11-year-old knows an 11-year-old's coming out. I mean, the only way 11-year-old could come out is if they're being groomed by adults. 11-year-old transgender girl Dempsey Jara, the youngest Grand Marshal in the history of Orlando, Come Out Parade. It's really hard to read this, just ridiculous. Had a message Saturday when she took the stage at Lake Eola Park. Quote, remember, this person's 11. Being transgender, quote, it's not about a choice, Dempsey said while wearing a princess-style gown. Quote, it's about being true to myself. It's about embracing who I am, even when the world tries to tell me otherwise. It's about standing tall in my identity, even when it's really hard. Her mother, Jamie Jara, who's 45, and a school teacher, beamed beside her daughter or son while on stage. Off stage, she said her youngest child has always known who she was. Quote, she's always gravitated toward girl things, girl toys. We didn't need to have any of that stuff at home. She has always had 2 older brothers, Jamie said. She'd say, I'm a girl in my heart and my brain. She's been on this journey since she was 5 and living her best life. So let's say, for example, ladies and gentlemen, that all of that was so, okay? Why would you put the child in front of a pride parade and sexualize the child? Because the whole purpose of a pride parade, of course, is the sexualization of adults, and they get to choose that if they want to. They are adults. But a child? I mean, I actually thought that Governor DeSantis made it not quite comfortable for parents to include children in these kinds of events. Again, once they're 18, do what you want. Under 18, no. So the annual Pride event in its 18th year, according to Visit Orlando, also featured a 2-hour parade of rainbow-adorned floats, sponsored by businesses, unions, politicians, and even churches, all pledging support for a community frustrated by spate of state legislation they say was intended to erode their personal freedoms. What a bunch of nonsense. If you're an adult, you get to live your life freely in Florida and everywhere else. This is not what they're doing here. They're intentionally putting an 11-year-old and they're hiding behind the child. In fact, they're grooming the child, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly what this is about. So the chaos continues. It continues in America's schools. It continues in these types of situations where they are grooming children in public schools and elsewhere and putting them as the grand master of a parade. And then we have a Virginia House of Delegates candidate. That's right. A lady running for House of Delegates in the state of Virginia. She, believe it or not, is a porn star, but not like, you get to see it for free. You have to actually pay. But she's got her own channel for porn. And then when it was exposed that she is a porn star, she and her husband, by the way, and they have children, and this is all done in their house. Now, their children, my understanding, isn't part of this, but are not part of this, but their children are nonetheless, you would think they'd be aware of it by now. She tried to hide it. So here she is, a porn star, and she gets paid, and people pay her to see her acts online. And then when her Republican opponent exposed who she is and that she's running for the Virginia House of Delegates and that she supports these books that are in public schools and she doesn't support parental rights, and which of course Glenn Youngkin was just elected over, suddenly the same Democrat candidate saying, well, you don't have a right to tell people about what I'm doing. What do you mean they don't have a right to tell? Of course, that's the whole point of the vetting process when you run for office. Your opponent vets you, the media vets you, people vet you, and they find out who you really are, and they tell everyone. And then the public gets to decide whether they want to elect you. So Susanna Gibson, a mother of 2 young children who is running in a competitive race to represent District 57 in Richmond, showed quite a bit more than skin on the adult streaming website Chatterbait, according to screenshots of archived material reviewed by the Post. The 40-year-old nurse practitioner hosted more than a dozen of the live grumps, while her husband on the platform, which was then posted to a publicly accessible archive on the website Recurbate in September 2022, after she declared her candidacy, according to the Washington Post. Gibson also apparently maintained her Chatterbait profile after having announced her campaign in July, uploading at least one picture of herself on the sex streaming site the following month, according to a screenshot obtained by the Post. In other words, she was still doing this after announcing and filing for office. The unconventional candidate had more than 5,770 Chatterbait followers. What the heck is Chatterbait? I guess it's a video site, whom she repeatedly pressed for more tokens in exchange for certain acts in private showings, adding that she was raising money for a good cause. What was the cause? Was it for her? I mean, it was obviously for herself. I was raising money for my kids' private school education. Who makes this stuff up? And it's not made up. It's actually all true. It's verified. Except that she's running away from all this now, saying, you didn't have a right to tell everybody that I was really doing this. In other videos, she suggested that she and her husband have tried swapping with different partners as she is ethically non-monogamous. Why would it be ethical to be non-monogamous? But that he doesn't like sharing. Oh, God. Wow. Gibson often thanked the viewers after the tokens arrived, and her husband, a lawyer, in at least one case, echoed her husband's a lawyer. Oh, my God. So, and we have a picture. She's not showing anything in this picture, but you can see she looks very, sensual and happy in the picture with her face. Maybe you can show that picture up there from the site. Chatterbait terms and conditions state. So the website Chatterbait. Terms and conditions state, quote, requesting or demanding specific acts for tips may result in a ban from the platform for all parties involved. Except that that's precisely why you tip and people accept your token tips because they accept the tips because they get more money.
Tips.
She's been accepting a lot of tips, that's for sure. In a statement to the Washington Post, Gibson called the publicly posted videos an illegal invasion of my privacy designed to humiliate me and my family.
How's it an illegal invasion of your privacy? You posted it online.
She's literally showing every intimate act imaginable. And she said that she's being humiliated by people showing that what she's doing. You can't do that. Quote, it won't intimidate me. And it won't silence me, Gibson said. My political opponents and their Republican allies have proven they're willing to commit a sex crime to attack me. So her opponents who are exposing what she's doing, even though she's already exposed herself, are committing sex crimes. Really?
It's not like they broke into their house. And
Exactly. Well, maybe her husband, who's a lawyer, can sue them, So there's no line they won't cross to silence women when they speak up. That's right. So women who speak up about their porn life and try to protect themselves from the people that are trying to take advantage of them, the Republicans, for actually showing everybody what they're doing. The candidate's attorney, Daniel P. Watkins, I guess she didn't hire her husband, told the outlet that the archived videos violated Virginia's revenge porn law, which makes it a Class 1 misdemeanor to maliciously circulate sexual images or another person's nudity with intent to coerce, harass, or intimidate. I'm sorry. What about what she's doing and she's getting paid for it? The lawyer cited a Virginia Court of Appeals ruling in 2021 that it was illegal for a man to secretly record his girlfriend during a consensual sexual encounter, even if that video was never shared with others. We are working closely with the state and federal law enforcement, the attorney said. So there's also a picture, and maybe Chris can show this as well, where the candidate, Gibson, and her husband, the lawyer, are with their two young children in like a stadium somewhere. It looks like the Redskins Stadium or the Commanders Stadium, as they're called now. And they look all so happy and so family-oriented, and I'm sure that's the picture that she's showing the voters. And now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, surprise, surprise, she's 11 points behind in the race. And why do you suppose? Why do you suppose? It just shows you chaos is occurring in America's elections. Chaos is occurring in international affairs. And chaos is occurring in America's public schools. And I think the American people just want to break from the Democrat nutcases who are running this country into the ground, and also the Republican statists who are their willing partners doing the same thing. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, X, Getter, True Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.